here we've got a lot of interest in our presentation today, so we're going to get on in about 1 more minute as people are signing up. So stand by. We're about to begin. All right, I think we're about to get started. We have had a couple of comments that that the audio is a bit garbled, so we'll do our best to all mute and make sure that things are good. But again, welcome. This is Greg Cummings with Strix, and on behalf of Ned Blinick and Blinko Systems, we're happy to present Mike Laden today with his best-in-class import practices. Mike, as you know, for those of you who don't know him, he's been in the business for over 40 years and has probably forgotten more about trade compliance than many of us will ever know. So we're really happy to have Mike with us today. We will let you know that this is going to take at least the full hour. Maybe we'll go over a little bit, but I think you'll find that the presentation is well worth it. So without further ado, Mike, please take it away.
All right, good afternoon, and I cannot see the dialogue or the chat box window, but if you are having problems, technical problems or difficulty, please don't hesitate to chat that, and then someone can interrupt me and we'll try to get that fixed. A couple of things about today's presentation. First and foremost, the one necessary ingredient that I think is fundamental to doing the job or the tasks that we do is passion. And if you really take away anything from this afternoon's presentation, you may sense it in my voice and the way I talk about this business or this activity we call global or international trade. It's that I have great passion for the work that I do. And again, I think that's a real fundamental ingredient that's necessary to thrive in this industry. If you can't embrace your role with passion, it's really my thought that you might consider another career. And I used to say that all the time at Target. For those that aren't familiar, for a number of years recently in the late 1990s and early 2000s, I ran Target's import program. And I used to say this all the time: if you really can't embrace your role with passion, you should look for a different role or opportunity in life, because going to work happy every day changes everything that you do, not only with your fellow co-workers and your customers, but even your friends and family. So it's the one big thing. And if you find yourself grumbling all the time about the work or the tasks that you have ahead, then perhaps this isn't for you. Be mindful of the fact that we all, and I used to have these all the time too, we used to have an occasional day or two that we don't look forward to or that are undesirable because you've got to tell someone they didn't get your business, or they're not meeting expectations and you're terminating their employment. But by and large, if you can't go to work with a smile on your face every day, I'd say do yourself a favor and everyone around you and look for something else. Now, what we talk about today, size does matter, but basically the concepts that I'm going to discuss today are scalable and should be scalable to your particular operation. So if you're not Target stores with 300,000 plus entries every year, and you only have 3,000 or 300 entries, some of the things I talk about are scalable, and you don't need an army of people to put them in play. All importers, remember this, no matter what their size, we're subject to the same requirements, and that's the standard that CBP calls reasonable care. We all have to meet that standard. So every global company, in my view, needs at least one person every night, and that used to be me for Target, who lays awake and worries sometimes about compliance. I fervently believe that, and if you're that person, I admire you. I've spent many sleepless nights worrying about our level of compliance. In fact, I used to argue with customs all the time that instead of looking at me like what am I trying to get away with, or a crook, why don't you look at me the way I really am, which is I agonize about compliance, and I'm trying to do the best job I can in being highly compliant in our import business. The other fundamental ingredient is executive leadership support. I can't say enough about it. Senior management in your company has to be committed to compliance, and usually that's done in writing with some sort of a policy or compliance statement. Then, hopefully, they need to provide the resources for you to be vigilant and highly compliant. Sometimes that's human bodies, sometimes that's systems, but the bottom line is they need to provide you with the resources. If the company that you work at has somewhat of a compliance culture, that usually starts in the boardroom, which is where it should start, with the executives and the executive office. So again, no matter what your size is, if you're importing 10 shipments a year, or if you're importing 300,000, somebody at the top echelon in your company needs to understand the necessity to run a compliant operation. And getting there sometimes in different companies isn't easy. If you're in a medium-sized importer that has several thousand entries a year or more, sometimes reaching the boardroom isn't an easy task. So I have a quick idea that's withstood the test of time, and that is there's two positions within a company that you as a compliance executive or professional want to be close to. And the first one, in my mind, is the general counsel, or the person within your company that really heads up the law department, if you will. Now, if you're really small and you don't have a law department, that's probably the owner of your company. But the bottom line is, if you do have a law department, you want to get as close to that general counsel as possible. And why? Because he knows the law. He understands the law, and he also has the ear of the chairman or the other senior leadership within the company. So it's very critical, and if you have him on your side, that makes a world of difference. The other person that you want to really get close to is the CFO. Why? Because they're in charge of controlling the company's purse strings. And if they understand the magnitude and depth of the fines and penalties that your company could be subjected to if you're not compliant, that ought to get the CFO's attention. And likewise, just like the general counsel, the CFO has the ear of the chairman or the senior executives in the company. So if you get both of them in your corner and both of them are singing the same song to the chairman, it's very likely that you'll get the resources you need to be a compliant company. And most recently, of course, companies today have CCOs, Chief Compliance Officers. If you have such a position within your organization, I also recommend you include them in getting close to them. One of the best-in-class things, and I honestly believe that customs would agree with this, although they can't support certain work schemes, one versus another, but in my very humble opinion, would be a centralized import or trade compliance work group. It's working trade compliance in a decentralized role, it is possible, but it makes it tricky. And you have to really step up the communication if you're in a very decentralized company as it relates to trade compliance, meaning frequent meetings and interaction to make sure you're all performing the same activities with the same level of vigilance. And again, yes, I believe CBP would agree that centralized is best. And for some companies, again, I recognize because of culture or other factors that may not be possible. So again, in those cases, to the greatest extent, you should always try to have common policies and procedures across all divisions or subsidiaries. And again, as I said, then regular meetings with those stakeholders are vital. This is one of the most frequent questions I get asked all the time. And in some companies, trade compliance is like an orphan. No one wants it. No one understands what we do. In fact, in a lot of companies, the work that we do as trade compliance professionals is viewed as some sort of black magic or something. And I've seen over the years, especially in recent years as a consultant, trade compliance groups reporting into all different areas of a company: finance, distribution, inventory, legal and law, tax, or risk. Some companies have regulatory compliance groups that trade compliance reports to. And again, I get asked this question all the time: where should we report? And my answer is, and I hope you don't think this is a cop-out, but honestly it is. The answer is wherever you and your trade compliance professionals have and enjoy the most authority within the company. And that's the authority, if you will, to occasionally, if it's necessary, say no. No, we're not going to do that. No, we're not going to import those goods. No, we're not going to import from that country. Now, as a trade compliance professional, most of the time you want to always say yes. And sometimes you can, yes, and here's the consequences, though, of importing from there. But occasionally you may need to say no. And so, again, you should be reporting internally wherever you have the most authority to do that if it's necessary. A long time ago, a CEO I was talking to just couldn't get his head wrapped around why trade compliance was so important. And I was trying to explain to him the number of different internal relationships that we have to manage and external relationships. And then, so I put together this slide, and with one quick visual like this, he got it. And again, you're going to be getting a copy of the presentation at the end of this presentation, so please feel free to go ahead and use this slide if you think it's meaningful. But with this one visual slide, all of a sudden the CEO got it. And again, at Target, I used to say our tentacles as trade compliance professionals need to reach out and touch many different areas of the company. So these are some of the internal relationships that at a company like Target, trade compliance had to interact with and reach out and communicate with and touch on a given workday. And these are all of the external government agencies and service providers that we had to manage as well. And so here we are in the middle. Once I showed a senior executive this slide, they got it. Wow, look at that. Look at all these different relationships and providers and government agencies that our trade compliance group has to interact with in order to be successful in their role. So again, feel free to use that if you think it'll help. Bottom line is, I think trade compliance should be used by the rest of the company as a consultant on any matter related to global trade, imports or exports. And so you should seek that status if you don't enjoy that today. The trade compliance group should have adequate time and authority to develop or implement new policies or procedures when they're needed to make sure that the company has effective internal controls over their import or export business. And then if practical, again, in that consultant capacity, you can work with buyers or engineering or those in procurement that are getting goods. A best-in-class practice is to work with them, and again, as a consultant, to do what I call tariff engineering, and that means taking an item, looking at its specifications and attributes, and then working perhaps with the merchant or engineers to engineer that into a different lower duty rate within the tariff. And such exercises are perfectly legal as long as you actually undertake those kinds of activities and make those kinds of changes to the item you're speaking about. But the bottom line is you should be viewed as a consultant to the rest of the company. You want people to come to you or to your group with questions when they're about to make some changes related to business and global trade. Participation, that is a best-in-class practice, of course, is to participate in some of CBP's incentive-based programs. The big one, of course, is the Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism. CTPAT is a security initiative that was stood up right after 9/11. And in order to get into the next two categories, ISA or Trusted Trader, CTPAT is a prerequisite. So you have to be in CTPAT before you can apply for ISA. Both of, or all three of these programs, Trusted Trader is the newest one, and it's not really codified yet or stood up. Customs is working on setting up some pilots that will be coming out either later this year or early next as it relates to Trusted Trader. But these other two programs can provide you some pretty big benefits. CTPAT, if you're in it, importers get reduced examinations from Customs. And then, of course, being in ISA, it exempts your company from undergoing or being in the audit pool or undergoing a focused assessment by Customs. So those are two pretty big benefits. And then they have the Centers for Excellence and Expertise today. There are 10 of those around the country, and I'm not sure how many on today's call, how many of the participants will be being already processed in the Cs, but there is a migration to processing most of the trade activity in one of those 10 Cs around the country. And then, of course, again, best in class, it means that you and your trade compliance professionals in your company stay informed, meaning you come to seminars like this, you read the Journal of Commerce or the American Shipper, you go to events like ICPA, the International Compliance Professionals Association. Excuse me. Incoterms. Best-in-class practice is that most companies use only one or two authorized Incoterms to purchase or acquire merchandise or to sell goods if it's an export. I can't tell you how many companies I've walked into where sales or marketing are using all manner of Incoterms. They're all over the board, 4, 5, 6 different Incoterms they're using. And worse than all of that is that the marketing companies don't understand those Incoterms and the meaning of them. And as a result, the company isn't making nearly the margin that they think they're making on their items because they're incurring or eating a bunch of costs that the marketing department wasn't aware of. So again, best in class is to only authorize one or two. Again, remember that improper or uninformed use of an Incoterm it hurts your margin. And DDP and CIF are not your friends. Let's face it. You get the best price usually when you go direct and you don't bundle, which is essentially what delivered duty paid DDP and cost insurance and freight CIF are. So if your company is purchasing a DDP or CIF today, you might sit down and actively think about trying to get out of those scenarios and start purchasing FCA or the old, what us old timers in the business call FOB at foreign origin. DIY. This is certainly, and you've got two companies on the phone with you today, Third Wave and Strict, that can help you do this. This is the age of DIY. Do it yourself. And certainly, more and more importers today are taking on the filing of their ISFs and customs entries directly with customs. We're in an age where all of us are filing our taxes and doing our banking, and in some cases purchasing homes and other large ticket items on the internet, and so why not customs entries? It is pretty easy, and today there are systems that assist you, just like a TurboTax for customs entries would, and certainly Strict can talk to you about that. If you are, though, however, using a traditional customs broker, that you use a best-in-class practice is that you use more than one, unless you're a real small importer. If you have 10 or 15 shipments a year, no, you probably only need one broker. But again, if you're a medium-sized importer, you should probably be using more than one, but less than 5. And that's kind of a common standard. You use more than one, perhaps just to keep a little competitive tension and advantage and not all your eggs in one basket. Sometimes you have more than one because one specializes in border entries or air freight entries or other types of critical work. But when I went to Target, as an aside, they had 12 brokers initially. We cut that back to 8, and then we ultimately got it down to just 2. So that's a very manageable number. Best in class, of course, is that you use logic and you clear your shipments unless the business case necessitates otherwise. You clear all of your shipments at the first U.S. port of arrival. That makes it much easier where the goods aren't moving in bond, and they essentially then become domestic shipments that you can reroute or redirect to other places. Best in class purchases imported items, again, direct, not using a DDP or CIF Incoterm, again, unless business case necessitates otherwise. Technology systems and technology solutions are not only supported, but that they're trade intelligent, meaning that the systems you're using understand Incoterms and understand long lead times and understand foreign addresses and foreign currency and all the other nuances of global trade. If the systems you have are not trade intelligent, sometimes some companies purchase or acquire a bolt-on system. And again, today with you, you've got Third Wave, which provides very high visibility and especially customized to handle global trade. You are not, and this is not a best-in-class practice, your company is not operating on disparate spreadsheets. That makes life very difficult in some respects. If you've got spreadsheets all over the place, and that's how you're managing and operating your business with that and crib notes, if you will, that doesn't usually bode well for you. And most importers today in a best-in-class are operating in a completely paperless environment. That means their POs are electronic, the advanced ship notices are electronic, the documents coming back to them are electronic, and even some of the payments or all of the payments they're making are electronic. They're operating in a true paperless environment. Strategic meetings. Best in class, of course, is to have regular business reviews with your brokers and other critical service providers. You need to sit down and talk to them. Again, if you're a small or medium-sized importer, once a year might work. If you're a larger importer, you might consider twice a year. And of course, at Target, we used to do it quarterly. Every quarter, we would sit down for a couple of hours and review the last quarter's activity and then talk about what's coming up ahead for us. And that's very critical. So it really spawns and fosters excellent two-way communication. And you benchmark. You go to meetings or conferences like ICPA. When you're there, take advantage of that time to talk about compliance processes and internal controls with your peers. Do benchmarking. It was always my view at Target, again, that we're all in this together. And so we might as well share. If you're doing something better than I am, or you have a tighter internal control related to compliance, I'd sure appreciate it if you'd share that with me. And vice versa. If I'm doing something better than you, I'd share it with you. So benchmark often with your peers or others that are engaged in trade compliance. Fixing errors. Of course, my view is always that errors are learning opportunities, and they truly are, and you should expect errors. This is a highly complex, regulated business that sometimes is error-prone, and that's okay. I used to encourage people, I want you to make an error, but I want you to learn from that. And when an error does occur, in my mind, you need to do three things, of course. You got to fix it for today, meaning you got to correct whatever is wrong with, say it's a customs entry. You got to fix that customs entry for today and get the recheck, if you will, back to customs. But then you need to fix it for yesterday, meaning if you need to look at prior shipments that have come in to see if that error occurred in those instances. And most importantly, you need to fix it for tomorrow, meaning if that vendor had erroneously put some information on an invoice that caused a mistake, you need to get to that vendor and make sure that they correct the documents going forward for the future. Otherwise, the error perpetuates itself, and you're constantly in the mode of trying to catch it and fix it. And if one day you're out on vacation and someone else is filling your role, they're probably going to miss it. You're going to make a mistake. So, yeah, when an error occurs, really three things. Fix it for today, but then look backwards and forwards and make sure you fix both sides of that. Again, most errors, yep, perpetuate themselves. And then errors should be recapped. When errors are made, especially by a broker, they should be recapped and reported on a scorecard. And those are the things that you discuss in your quarterly or annual meetings with your broker. The number of errors that you experienced in the preceding 6 months or year. Best in class, of course, is to have established internal controls. That means for all of these critical things, classification, value, origin, record keeping, assists if you have them, you need quantified, verifiable internal controls to manage these activities related to imports. And if you don't have them, I highly recommend that you sit down and consider it. Yes, you need a manual. And I know when I say that to a lot of people, they shudder or they groan. The last thing they want to do is go to work on a given day and sit down and write a manual. Most people procrastinate or avoid that or don't like it. But the bottom line is you really, really need one. If you take away anything, it's document what you're doing. And you know, remember too that policies are different than procedures are. So you need policies and procedures. And today, of course, most people that do the manuals typically publish them via an intranet. You need to update them, make sure they're constantly up to date. And the bottom line is it's just good business practice to have that institutional knowledge documented at your company rather than walking around in someone's head. And it will be, if customs ever does come to visit, it's going to be one of the first things they're going to want to see is where are your manuals. And if you say we don't have them, that's going to be a problem. And it will undoubtedly result in a compliance improvement plan with customs, or something we call a CIP, a CIP. Bottom line, though, is if you don't document your practices, that knowledge is probably walking around in someone's head, and if they leave the company, that leaves a big hole in your trade compliance program. One of the best-in-class practices is that you pre-classify your import items. That means that you're involved with the onboarding, if you will, of new suppliers or vendors, and from the moment someone in your company decides they're going to purchase something, if it's an import, that you and your trade compliance group are involved. That way you have a lot of advanced time to look at it, classify it for customs purposes, do a screening to see if a PGA, and that stands for Partnering Government Agencies, if there's going to be other agencies that need to be involved in the import and release. And you also want to do an FTA screen, that's a free trade agreement screen, to see if this item qualifies for reduced or preferred rates of duty as a result of a free trade agreement. The bottom line is you should be classifying all of the goods that your company is importing well in advance before they're actually imported into the country. And if you're not that far upstream in the process, you should do whatever you can to start working toward that as a goal or objective. You should also then have a sophisticated parts database, and you maintain those. That contains all of your item or part numbers and their corresponding harmonized tariff number, as well as sometimes flags for free trade agreements or PGA activity. And then, and this is something that a lot of people miss, ELC, ALC. The ELC stands for Estimated Landed Cost, and the ALC stands for Actual Landed Cost. A lot of importers, especially manufacturers, sometimes they're working in something called standard cost for their items. But a lot of people miss the boat on this. When you're going to import an item, someone in your company, and namely the trade compliance group is usually involved in this, should be estimating the landed cost that this is going to come in at. So you take the first cost, then you add on a freight component, you add on duty, you might add on banking and insurance and some other fees, and you arrive at your estimate of what it's going to cost the company to get this item to this particular point in your supply chain. Then you go ahead and do the import. At the end of that import, somebody should look at the actual landed cost and ensure that it came close to the estimate. Why? Because if it's not, if it's out of sync, either high or low, something was wrong with your estimate, and your estimate probably drove the margin that you decided you're going to market or sell the item for, and so that's probably out of whack. The bottom line is you should do an ELC, ALC comparison or reconciliation every once in a while, and a lot of importers miss that opportunity. Using FTAs, I've found a number of importers in the field they've frankly just given up on using free trade agreements because they're so complex or so onerous with all the requirements. But if you have the manpower and you have the systems in place, using an FTA isn't such a big deal, and it does, of course, qualify your company for duty-free or preferential treatment. So best in class certainly is that you're taking advantage of all the FTAs that are available, and if you're one of those that are not, you start working towards that again as a goal by developing and implementing systems that help mitigate your risk if that's appropriate. And again, with sourcing, people in your company that are outsourcing items or products, this is another area for your group as a trade compliance area to be consulted. And that's for counter sourcing opportunities. We used to do this all the time at Target. We'd say, yeah, you're importing that item from China, but did you know that if we counter sourced it over here in Vietnam or the Philippines, it's duty-free because it qualifies for GSP or it qualifies for some other free trade agreement. And that way you're giving people in your company options. Yeah, they still may want to import it from China because the quality is different or better, but at least they have options, and again, that gives you visibility and opportunities to consult with them. For NAFTA, there are some importers today that are talking about shifting to TPP and making that shift sooner rather than later, because they're viewing TPP as something that provides greater benefits, especially over NAFTA and the hoops that you've got to jump through to certify your items for that FTA. Frequent training. This is an area where, again, a lot of companies don't do a very good job, and it goes hand in hand with the thing I mentioned about communicating, just talking or communicating with your internal stakeholders. My motto at Target was I would talk to anyone that'll listen. And it wasn't to self-promote our area, but it was to raise your awareness that we exist and to help you understand the necessity for us being a highly compliant company. So again, my view was I'd get out there and talk to anyone that would listen. I tried to make my talks interesting, and you know, it again is an opportunity for you to get in front of the stakeholders and talk about some of the issues or problems that your group as a trade compliance group has experienced. Second set of eyes. I always felt like this at Target. I would never deny anyone the right to come in and put a second set of eyes on our import program, either through an audit of some of our entries or some of our other internal controls. And the reason was because I'm not a know-it-all. I don't pretend to know everything there is to know about trade compliance. And so once again, if you've got a better idea or you see something that I'm missing, I'd be delighted for you to point that out, show me, and then help work with me to figure out a way to mitigate that risk or close off that gap. So I always welcomed a second and sometimes third set of eyes on our import program. The bottom line is, and again, a lot of importers miss this, you should be auditing at a bare minimum 10 to 15% of all the work product that your customs broker gives you. A lot of companies I walk into, they're not doing any audit. And again, that's a recipe for disaster. Brokers aren't perfect, and they do make mistakes. And I used to, again, that's sometimes a mind-numbing activity to sit down and expect people to audit work. But I used to enjoy it. And so I'd sit there, sometimes I'd go home at night and get a bowl of popcorn and sit down in front of the TV, and I'd have 20 or 25 of our entry packets, and just like a teacher grading papers, I'd go through those, and sometimes I was shocked at some of the mistakes and the errors that I found. And of course, when you do find a mistake, you expand the sample size a little bit to make sure you've captured all of the errors or problems. The bottom line, too, is that if your company is large enough and you have an internal audit group, you should leverage them. They're your friend. It's one of the first things I did when I went to Target, is I engaged the internal audit group, asked them to come down to our area, and asked that we be put under a perpetual audit. So one month they'd look at origin, the next month quantity, the next month classification, the next month value, and it rotated. And that process is still in place today, and they have been very helpful to trade compliance at Target. The bottom line is, no matter what you're doing, your internal group or an external company should review your processes at least every 3 years or less. Again, depending on your size, or if you've had a lot of changes over the course of a year or two, you might want to engage someone sooner. But the bottom line is, bringing someone in for a day or two to look at your processes can pay huge dividends for a rather nominal fee. So that's a good thing to do. Again, I don't want to beat this up too much, but it's very, very important. You audit 10 to 15% of your entries. You're looking at the entry data. I used to do a 4-way value match, meaning we would look at the ELC, the estimated landed cost. We'd look at the purchase order price. We'd look at the actual landed cost. And then it's really critical to look at the 7501. What did you declare to customs? And all four of those values right down the line should match. And if they don't, we used to have an exception report kick out, and then a human would intervene and investigate the cause of the discrepancy and why one of the values in this didn't match. The other thing that a lot of people miss is quantity, tying out your receiving records with the quantity that was declared on the 7501 to customs. Sometimes there's overs or shorts or damaged goods, and if you don't have a tight internal control and process for getting the OS&D or overs and shorts reported to trade compliance, you're going to miss that. And that's a big problem if customs comes in and audits and finds that there are discrepancies between your receiving records and your entry records. And of course, yes, whenever an error is found, you always want to expand the sample size to make sure that you capture everything. Another best-in-class practice is leveraging available tools, that you're using the CBP and ACE portal to monitor and manage your customs data. And if you're not, I highly, highly encourage you to get on board. Someone from Strix can help you if you're wondering how that's done. It's not the easiest process in the world, and the ACE portal isn't the most user-friendly system in the world, but the bottom line is we as taxpayers have paid for the system. The data is there and available, and you should really get in and learn how to use it and look at your customs data on a frequent basis. I'd say once a month or more, or quarterly. At a minimum, quarterly, you should look for these suspicious activities in that data. Unknown filer codes, meaning that when you get into ACE and look at your entry data, you'll see the filer, the 3-digit filer code. If you see an unknown filer code in your entry data, that means you've got an unknown broker, or a broker that's filing entries on and against your surety bond that you're not familiar with, and you need to get to the bottom of it. You also want to look for unusual ports of entry, and you also want to look for any of your entries that have been suspended from liquidation. Why? Because that's a flag or an important item that something is amiss with customs. If customs is routinely suspending your entries from liquidation, that's indicative that there's a problem, and you want to try to figure it out and get to the bottom of it as quickly as possible. So you certainly want to review your data, and these are 3 big reasons why. Best in class, of course, is that you pay all your duties and fees directly via ACH to customs, and if you qualify via PMS, the periodic monthly statement. PMS allows you to pay your duties and fees once a month to customs, almost like paying a credit card statement. So the entries and fees that you bring in over the course of a month aggregate, and you make one monthly payment. But the bottom line is you should all be paying your customs duty fees direct to customs via ACH, not to your broker. If you're paying duties and fees to your customs broker, they are at risk. And if for any reason that broker doesn't pay customs or happens to file a Chapter 7 and go bankrupt, you owe those duties and fees a second time to customs, or they'll go after your surety. So again, those fees are at risk. Again, customs under their ACH program allows debit or credit options, so they make it very easy. You can go either way. And for some companies that I've talked to about this, the CFO comes back and he's very reluctant or nervous about allowing someone access to your bank accounts to move money around. If you're in that class, I have your CFO get a hold of me, and I can, I'm sure, convince them that it's a very safe program, and there's 100 good reasons why you should be paying duty direct to customs. Okay, this is kind of a fun but yet scary slide. You know you're in trouble when, and I have a client like this that got a call from the receptionist one morning who said there's a couple of ICE agents in the lobby to see you. And that day didn't go so well for her or the company for that matter. But it's very serious business, and I make light of it, but if this happens to your company, it's very, very serious. You also know you're in trouble when the mailroom calls or delivers a certified letter from CBP to you. That's how CBP will send important matters related to your import program. It'll usually come just like this. Certified mail, and this is, of course, an actual envelope. The concern with an envelope like this is that they don't put a specific department name or person's name on that envelope. It just has your company name, your address, city, state, and zip. That's it. It doesn't say attention Mike Laden or attention Customs Department or imports or trade compliance. So the bottom line is, depending on how big your company is, an envelope like this could wind up in anyone's inbox. It could be sent to tax, it could be sent to legal, it could be sent off to finance. The point is, in a lot of companies, you want to make sure that the mailroom knows what they're doing with envelopes like this. Two, if you get an envelope like this, it probably contains some very important correspondence. And the bottom line in this instance, and this is a relatively new one, is that that envelope contained this letter, and you see it's dated March 8th of this year. But this is a very, very serious matter for this particular company. This is a letter advising them that they've been put under investigation, and it's citing Section 1592, which is very, very serious. That's the fraud statute for customs. So a very serious issue, and this company is in the process right now of dealing with that letter and correspondence from customs. Bottom line is, if you're an importer, you and your company want to have effective policies for communicating timely, and that's the operative word there, timely with CBP. So some companies today limit who can speak on the company's behalf with CBP. That also limits who can respond to a notice of action or a request for information, CF 28s or 29s. If you allow anyone to answer those documents, you could possibly send some wrong information or miscommunication to customs that would have negative ramifications, both on the classification and could also wind up creating or starting an investigation. So you want to be very careful when you get a 28 to make sure you answer it thoroughly, completely, and with accurate information, and you want to make sure that the person answering it has the expertise and experience to do so. You should also have a protocol for what happens if, just if, there is that unannounced visit from CBP or ICE. Bottom line is, if they come in with a search warrant, there's nothing you can do. It'll be step aside, they'll hand you the search warrant, and they will begin dismantling your trade compliance area or whatever they're looking for. But short of a search warrant, if they just pay you an unannounced visit, it's well within your right to detain them or hold them or ask them to sit in the lobby and be patient and wait until you can get the executive team together that you're going to want to meet with them. You're more than within your right to ask that, and again, especially if that's an unannounced visit. We recommend, too, though, in communicating with them, that if you happen to travel to the port that you enter your goods through, that you schedule a visit with them. If your size and volumes warrant, I highly recommend that you go intentionally visit the port and meet with the CBP import specialists that are handling your goods. That fosters good communication and you're likely to learn quite a bit more about CBP's views on the products that you're importing. The bottom line is this. The supply chain is the lifeblood of many organizations, and some of us sometimes feel that the senior executives underestimate its value. And of course, so then when it stops, things don't usually go real well. If you're part of that supply chain or part of that problem, are highly illuminated and under a great amount of pressure within the company to get it moving again. And that's why contingency planning is important. So when you have problems, you're as prepared as you can be and can address them quickly and efficiently and get that supply chain moving again. But in my mind, in my humble opinion, the two most critical and fundamental attributes of a good trade compliance department really go back to my opening slide. It's the passion for what we do and laying awake at night a few nights worrying about your program or trying to build the better mousetrap. And then it's also excellent communication. It's talking internally to the stakeholders that are a part of your process, and then also communicating externally with the stakeholders such as your brokers and customs on a regular and ongoing basis. Everyone's going to have mistakes. The good companies identify those mistakes quickly and get them fixed both for today and tomorrow. And the bad ones perpetuate it and let them go and don't communicate well and other attributes. So again, bottom line, passion and communication will get you a long way in this industry. And with that, there's my contact information. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. I have not been following the dialogue, so Cassie, if there are some questions out there that people have been chatting, feel free, you can join now. And if not, I appreciate your time, and I'd invite Greg and Ned to jump on and offer some closing remarks. But thanks again for attending, and if you have questions, go ahead.
There was one question out there, Mike, in regards to ISA.
Yeah.
And the question was, is there a benefit of implementing ISA procedures even though they wouldn't officially participate in ISA?
Yeah, great question. And yeah, of course, you don't have to officially participate. And in fact, I would tell you too, at Target, before we officially threw our hat in the ring, of course, we developed the internal controls and procedures related to having internal audit work with us on our trade compliance program and policy. And we essentially ran parallel to ISA for it was over a year before we officially applied. But yes, I feel certainly that even though you don't formally apply for the program, mirroring it conceptually is a good thing. And I highly encourage, if you do have internal audit departments, again, as I said in the presentation, that you leverage that expertise and leverage them as an asset to help you. And if they don't have people in your internal audit group that are familiar with trade compliance, ask your director or VP of internal audit to get someone. At Target, they have 3 licensed brokers that work and report to internal audit. They're not part of the trade compliance group, they're part of internal audit. So they have that expertise and knowledge. But yes, I would highly recommend it.
All right, great, thanks. There aren't any more questions, so I thought I might give a quick comment on our participation in the recent NCB FAA conference. And for those of you, who aren't familiar out there, we're a member of the National Brokers Freight Forwarder Association. And the NCB FAA has been very, very much a champion for all of us in keeping the feet to the fire for CBP and the rollout of ACE. And so at the conference, there were a lot of people from CBP there from a lot of different areas, and the recent extensions in deadlines were very much a part of some straightforward talk and very official letter writing going on between NCBFA and CBP. And so we believe, as members of that organization, that they provided a very critical interface in helping CBP understand what we experience out in the trade as well, and how the imposition of some of these deadlines was really going to create some friction and potential havoc in the entry filing universe. So those deadlines have been extended. The commissioner did speak. He arrived, and of course that was, a fairly political conversation, not a lot of substance, but there were discussions on CEEs. The FDA chief was there. The head of ACE was there. So CEEs, very much a focus of CBP. They are beginning to extend the CEEs. We all care about that as an importer of record because it's designed to kind of take that little fiefdom that these ports have been operating on for years and years and years and put an understanding of your particular products and goods that you're bringing in a particular sector in the hands of professionals and people who understand them. So you're not having someone who understands machinery making textile bids and things like that. So the CEEs are the direction that Customs intends to continue to go and make stronger and stronger. Very good for the trade. The FDA chief was there. Many of you are probably involved in bringing in goods subject to FDA. And FDA is one of those agencies that has delayed their implementation of moving to cargo release. That's all been good. We point blanked him on when they expected to implement FDA to cargo release, and he said not till the end of December. So for those of you who are filing entries, you will not have a mandate to move to cargo release until December. Again, a good thing. They understand that there are bugs in the system, and the more importers that have gone through the pilot program and have begun to file in FDA, the more those bugs, quite frankly, are being found. I mean, we in the trade are providing CBP with the answers to or the finding of bugs in their system that then can be fixed. So a little bit of a sigh of relief there that we've still got a lot of time for them to continue to perfect that system. The head of ACE was there. The woman who is in charge of implementing and getting this program done. And the, of course, challenge is to get all of the PGAs integrated by December. We don't know what's really going to happen, and they're not really tipping their hand as to whether or not there'll be further delays. But the problem has been that each PGA has literally been hiring their own coding experts to get this done. So there's a wide variety of success in those programs, and my guess is that we could see some programs that will be delayed yet again. FCC, word on the street is FCC is going away, and you're no longer going to have to file any PGA documentation for FCC. So for those of you who are FCC, yay, you won't have to do that. And there was a roundtable that just kind of talked about some of the differences in what's been happening in an ACE environment versus ACS. And what's happened is there have been coding and there have been mandates that have been put in place, but for years ACS has not recognized them. And one such example is for those of you who have rail shipments that especially might land in Vancouver and then come across and be delivered. If you have multiple containers, Steamship Line has been putting containers on different trains, but we've been able to enter those entries as one entry. That is not allowed, or the mandate is it's not allowed. ACS did not recognize that, but ACE does, and ACE does not let you file that entry. It's not considered a split entry. So the trade's doing a little bit of a juggling act there in trying to get the information to the steamship lines and allow us to be able to make entries as they are expected within the system. So just a quick note there that things are moving forward. There's been a lot of successes with ACE entry summary and ACE cargo release, but still a number of bugs and a number of things to work out. So good news is this continues in a measured fashion, and by and large, we really don't face a lot of real problems. ACE is down, of course, a little bit more than we'd like, but other than that, the program is moving forward, I think, in a way that we all want it to. So, parting words there. Ned, did you have anything to add? Yes, Ned must be muted. So we will we'll say thank you for all joining today. As always, we will have this. We did record this, and it will be available as a link for either you or other team members who might not have been able to join us today. And again, thank you for all of us from Blinko, Strix, and Trade Innovations. Thanks again.